You're listening to the Fan2Fan podcast, episode 4. Welcome to the show. This is the Fan2Fan podcast, and I am your host, Bernie Gonzalez. Fan2Fan, what is it? It's a conversation between fans about all the things they love. We talk about movies, comics, TV, video games, toys, cartoons, and just about anything pop culture. Today's episode is a lot of fun. I interview fellow artist and friend Jason Copland. I was actually introduced to Jason's work back in 2007 when he contributed to the graphic novel anthology Postcards. So Postcards was edited by Jason Rodriguez, and he brought together a number, I believe it was 16 different artists to illustrate the stories from a batch of vintage postcards that he'd put together, that he'd collected. So you had these very small fragments of stories, completely random, most of the time out of context, like a postcard sometimes is. And the illustrators brought those small little stories to life. Jason was one of those illustrators, and I was so enamored by his artwork that I sought him out. We had a multi-part interview through a blog where we went over the story, his art process, balancing work and life, and it was very interesting. So it was great to reconnect with him over a decade later, hard to believe, and just touch base with him and see what's changed, where he's been, where his art has gone, and what life is like as a full-time comic book artist. So here we go. So far I've done 14 episodes.
Oh, nice.
So I figured I would start and have a few in the bank just so I don't do the whole pod fade effect, which is like, hey, check out my first episode. And then next thing you know, it's like, hey, when's your next episode? It's been 3 months.
Yeah, that's like most things on the internet.
Yeah, that's just me being neurotic and trying to plan ahead.
Yeah, no, that's a good plan. I mean, that's what we did when we started Killing Monsters. We made sure we had a good chunk of stuff ready to go before we went live, because it's nothing worse than saying you're going to put up, a page every 2 days or whatever, and you do that for like a week, and then all of a sudden you gap. So it's good to have stuff banked.
Does that stuff get to you?
I think at one point I did. Now I just come to expect it. I almost expect things not to continue once people say that that's what they're going to do. Because, I don't know. Life gets in the way, and people have these great expectations of themselves, and then stuff happens, and you can't fault them for it. That's just life.
So thank you, by the way, for joining me on this little expedition.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you for asking.
So it's kind of crazy because I was going through this, and it made me feel that much older when I realized it was back in 2007 when I last interviewed you.
Oh, wow. That was a while ago.
Your son, Stuart, was 2.
Yep. Yeah.
And now he's 11.
He'll be 11 in July. Yeah.
That's crazy.
It is crazy. I know. I have the gray hairs to prove it.
I'm right there with you. I understand. And then when we did that interview at the time, you were actually we were working, I think it was 2 days a week at the Vancouver Public Library, right?
Yeah. I was doing a job share and kind of managing, like taking care of Stu, my son, part-time as well. So
yeah, because weren't you taking care of him like Monday through Wednesday and then library Thursday, Friday?
Something like that, yeah.
Something like that, okay.
Yeah, that's so far back I barely remember.
No, now full-time artist, right?
Yeah. I made the leap thanks to my wife.
I think that disclaimer goes for a lot of things in life, especially when you're an artist.
Yeah.
Thanks to my spouse.
Yeah, she's very understanding.
Yeah. So I figure for folks that may not know you, I'm going to go through some of your vitals, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So you've done work for quite a few different publishers: Image, Dark Horse, IDW, Random House. You did a story for Trickster, Native American Tales by Fulcrum Press. Did a story for Perhapanauts. The What If Infinity Guardians of the Galaxy for Marvel. Daredevil number 33 with Mark Waid. Robocop for Boom Studios, Kill All Monsters, Cam, that was Alterna, right?
Yep.
Elite Group Soldiers piloting giant robots versus monsters, and that was with Michael May, and I believe Ed Brisson was the letterer.
Yes.
Then that went into Dark Horse Presents, and then you had Pop for Dark Horse 2. That was the what if pop stars were celebrities, right? And they were literally products.
Yes.
Tomorrow's, quite a few FUBAR anthologies, right?
Yeah, I've been in a couple of them.
And then you've been doing some covers for Escape from New York. I think is it 7 issues?
Yeah, I ended up doing the last 8.
And we worked together on The Last Leaf. That was for the Once Upon a Time Machine anthology. And then that was written by Jason Mullerin. And it was a reimagining of an O. Henry story. So you did all the artwork, and then I got to follow your amazing line work and throw some colors in the mix.
Yeah, it turned out awesome, by the way.
And then the initial time when we did the interview was all because of your story for Postcards, True Stories That Never Happened, edited by Jason Rodriguez. And I was so enamored by your story, San Luis, his underwear, that I had to contact you at the time. So you think about it now, it's like, oh, in a vacuum, that title is like, wait, what was that?
Yeah.
But it's hard to believe that was 2007.
Yeah. It seems so long ago, yet it doesn't seem that long ago. It's kind of weird.
So did I miss anything major along the way there?
Oh, not really. I did one chapter in of Masks and Mobsters. That's a Josh Williamson and Mike Henderson title. I can't remember if that was I think that was going through Monkey Brain, and then that got all collected in one hardcover.
And that's where you're using the watercolors, right?
Yeah, I was just doing ink washes. Yeah. It's kind of I like doing that for when I do commissions and stuff. I usually do an ink wash sort of thing to kind of make it look a little more full. And they let me do that. I was just like, oh, can I do some ink wash on this? And like, yeah, sure, go for it. So I don't think I've done it in any other published stuff that I can think of. I kind of just did it for that one.
All right, so let's talk about artwork a little bit here. So how long have you been drawing?
Like seriously drawing? Probably since I was maybe like 15. So I don't really want to do the math there. There's an ageism in comics, so I got to be careful. So that was only like 5 years ago. No, just kidding. Yeah, so I've been doing it for quite a while, close to 30 years probably. And high school, I drew before that, but I didn't really take it serious till my senior year in high school. The only reason why I took art, though, in like grade 9 and 10 and such was because it wasn't a lot of homework. So I was looking to dodge homework, so I took art. I turned out to be one of the better ones in the class. And, you kind of feed off that sort of notoriety when you draw something really cool and everyone kind of gathers around and, wow, that's awesome. And so I kind of got excited about that sort of response. So
what kind of art class was it?
Oh, I took in my last couple of years, I took as many art classes as I could. So there was like a 3D class and a 2D class, and then one focused on drawing and one focused on painting. So I wasn't a great painter, but I was mostly a decent drawer. So
was it more drafting, or was there figure drawing too?
It was lots of still lives and things like that. My art teacher in high school, the last couple of years, he had a notion that he could turn us all into these amazing fine artist type people. So he was always trying to do interesting things in terms of collages and that sort of thing, like trying to push us a little bit. It wasn't just, basket weaving for kids. He actually did try to push us a bit. So it was a wide range of stuff. Definitely lots of still lives, though.
Is that what inspired you to go to art school eventually?
Yeah, I guess. Like I said, it felt like it was about the only thing that I was really good at. I was in a rock band in high school, but I sucked.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, but I sucked. It was fun, but I was like, man, no, music's not what I'm into. And to get into university at that point, I didn't take enough courses. Like I dropped my French and that sort of thing, so I couldn't really get into university very well. So it was kind of like, well, what do I have left? So art was pretty much it. So yeah, so I ended up just I went to art school in Calgary, Post-secondary education, I took a couple years at the Alberta College of Art, and then I kind of decided I didn't know if art was what I wanted to do, so I ended up applying to a film school here in Vancouver, and moving back to Vancouver, and then not going to school because the student loan would cover the tuition, but it wouldn't cover my living expenses. And they said that the course was one that you couldn't have a job outside of the class because there's just the time constraints, and were just too great, and I wouldn't have time to actually have a job. So I would have no income, and I wouldn't be able to afford a place to live. So I abandoned art school and then started doing just music retail. And that was me for a while.
Was it just for a job, or because you still had aspirations to, travel in this high school band of yours?
No, the high school band didn't last long. Although
disbanded.
Yeah, we threaten every once in a while to get back together again, but luckily that just never pans out. But yeah,
I got to ask, what was the name of the band?
CHP, and it was, as much as I hate acronyms, it was an acronym for something, but we never say what it is. It's a top secret that has never been revealed.
I like how you don't like acronyms, yet one of your creator-owned stories, Kill All Monsters, it's just easy to refer to as CAM.
Yeah, and I do it too. I say CAM all the time, which is pretty funny, in an ironic sort of way, I guess. Is that irony? I don't know. I never know what irony is.
Your first round of art school was Alberta College of Art? Yeah,
it was ACA, and then it's since changed. Riley Rosmo actually works, like he teaches there now. And I can't remember what it's called. It's the Alberta Institute of Art and Design or something like that. They all turn into institutes and colleges. After I did a couple years of retail, I went back to art school, and I ended up finishing up at Emily Carr here in Vancouver. And so I graduated art school, but once I graduated, I knew that I didn't really want to be practicing fine arts like a gallery artist, and the courses that I took weren't geared towards any real job. Like it wasn't. I took studio, and I wasn't, an illustrator by trade, or I wasn't into animation or any of those sort of things. So yeah, so I was kind of graduated with a lot of debt and no real knowledge of what I wanted to actually do.
I'll say those things usually put the fear of God in you.
Yeah, so I went back to working in music retail because that's what I knew best, and I did that after art school. I did that for another 4 years or something. Yeah.
You just got to make ends meet.
Yeah, well, I met my wife when I was going to Emily Carr, and we were dating, and we moved in, and we got married. I think it was about the year after. It was the year after I graduated, and and I just had the retail job to just sort of pay my share, and then I started taking art a little more seriously because I realized that music retail wasn't the way I wanted to spend my life. So
in that whole time at Alberta and Emily Carr, were comics an influence? Was it something from growing up back, when you were 15? Were you drawing and using comics as reference?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. The one reason I wasn't doing comics straight out of art school was that they systematically just drilled into my brain that comics weren't actually valid art. Like it wasn't an art form that anyone should aspire to, and and I was better off doing pieces about the deconstruction of hunger or whatever, and making some sort of bold statement and changing people's lives through some grand, artistic statement. So by the time I got out of art school, I had kind of decided that comics weren't really a valid sort of art form to do. And that took a few years to kind of deprogram myself and realize that comics were definitely a valid art form. And then I started, pursuing that a whole lot more with a more steady vision. That's what I wanted to do. And that is based on like comics that I've been reading when I was younger, and even through high school and stuff. I didn't really read comics once I got into art school. There was a gap there, probably about, I don't know, 8 or 9 years, where I didn't really read comics. And then I decided that comics, were something that I wanted to do. So I started buying a lot more stuff and buying old things that I had lost over time, like Dark Knight Returns and stuff like that, where it's like I knew I had a box of them somewhere, but either moving from Calgary to Vancouver or whatever, I seemed to have lost all of these issues that I had. So I had to go back and buy them all again and kind of reacquaint myself with a lot of the work that I found inspiring. So, did you collect comics when you were a kid in high school or anything? Yeah, for a few years until I discovered girls. I still have a bunch of them, like my G.I. Joes. I have the first, 40 or whatever. A lot of the Alpha Flights and stuff. I was a big Byrne fan. I really like John Byrne. Yeah, a bunch. Even I've got a bunch of my old Thors from Simonson's run and stuff like that. So I managed to hold on to some of them, but yeah, a lot of the stuff I lost, so I've had to rebuy it. So when you were not buying comics, that would have probably been around the time of the whole comics boom and the introduction of Image and everything? Yeah, I missed that whole thing. I think I went to a corner store and I bought, actually I think I still have it. I have a copy of Savage Dragon #3, and I like the way Larson drew some of the stuff that was in it, and so I just picked it up and bought it. But I wasn't really buying comics at the time. It was still a few more years later until I started getting back into actually buying and collecting. I'm not really a collector, but getting runs of stuff. Yeah, I mean, I'd probably say, being an artist, I probably don't collect comics for writers or for stories or even for characters. If there's a certain artist that just piques my interest or is doing something different or even something similar to what I'm doing, and maybe I can pick up a few things, I'll more than likely pick up a trade or a few issues of that. So same thing on your end? Yeah, I definitely don't. I don't care about characters at all, really. That's probably a horrible thing to say. Daredevil is really the only character that I've ever kind of stuck with over time. But even then, there's certain chunks of it that I enjoy, and there's other chunks that I just sort of bought for the art. But yeah, the majority of comics that I've bought over time, I buy for the art, not really for the stories. Yeah, I think being a creator, you end up having a different perspective for the things that are out there. I'm sure filmmakers look at films differently, but I think comic creators, maybe writers, feel the same way, but you're a fan of comics in a different way than someone who's not involved in the production of making comics. Yeah, I think and it even hit home. It hit home more when I started doing this full time, when I realized that that I kind of stopped reading comics once I started doing comics full time. I would read a lot more, definitely would read a lot more before I started doing this full time. I'm going to interrupt my conversation with Jason here just ever so quickly and remind you that the Fan2Fan podcast is available in the iTunes store. Just search Fan2Fan, F-A-N, the number 2, F-A-N. Also available on a number of different podcatcher apps, including Stitcher, Overcast, and TuneIn. And now, on with the show. So we did the interview back in 2007. Then you were kind of like part-time. When did you officially go into full-time? That's when I got the email from Steve Wacker at Marvel and asked if I wanted to do a fill-in issue of Daredevil. I thought about it for about, half a second and then said yes. And then I took a leave of absence from work. So that was 2013. It was like August of 2013, coming up 3 years now. And so I did that. I took that time off and I was doing the issue. And then just as I was finishing the issue, that's when Boom asked me to do the Robocop thing. And then I went back to work and I said, I'd like to take a little more time off because I've got something else that's kind of come up. And they were going to give me time, but they were kind of like, well, how much time do you want? And then I realized, well, even if when this was done, if something else came up, I couldn't really ask again. So I just asked what was the longest time I could take off. And they said a year. So I said, okay, give me a year. And then it just seemed like as I was finishing something would come up, and that just kind of snowballed until I realized that there was no way for me to finish what I was working on at the time before my year was up. So I just had to not go back, because what I was working on at the time I had to finish, and then did the drawing on the side. It just wasn't going to work. So, my wife, being very supportive, was like, yeah, this is your chance, so you better go for it. So I did. And so it's been almost 3 years now. So
Didn't it freak you out at all going from at least a regular paycheck to the freelance life?
Oh yeah, it scared the crap out of me. It still does, man. The freelance is a freaky place to be. You're always looking for the next one while you're working on something, and it's one of those things where it's you don't want to say it, but it could dry up. It could dry up as easy as it came to you in the first place, and so it's a little bit, it's nerve-wracking to know that at a certain time you might not have anything to do, and that's pretty hard to pay the bills when you don't have anything to do.
So after Daredevil, so you did Daredevil 33, that kind of got the ball rolling. Then after that was Robocop.
Yeah.
Did the work after that come from folks approaching you, or or what happened? What made you think, okay, you know what, if I'm going to take time off of work, if I'm going to use this as kind of like my opportunity to get into the industry, did you just, hit the pavement and reach out to every editor that's out there?
Not really. No, I'm not really good at kind of putting myself out there. It mostly came from people that I was working with previous, and then, the networking done at shows and stuff like that, where a writer would be like, oh, I just saw that you did this. I really want to work with you. And you just kind of build something out of that. I think the thing, I'm trying to remember what it was. I'm pretty sure that it was doing at the time. I think it might have been pop. But yeah, whatever I was doing, I think it was pop. That it was just one of those things where it's like, well, Kurt came to me and said, what do you think about working together? And I was like, yeah, because I'd read stuff that Kurt had done previous, and it was just one of those things where it was writers coming to me with projects that they thought that I would do well on, and just me running with that and doing my best to try to make sure that I lived up to their expectations.
So have you approached certain writers or asked to work with them? Or like you said, Kurt Pyers reaches out to you and says, hey, let's work together. You guys work on another project. Is it kind of that relationship?
Yeah, it's more like that. I'm really bad at putting myself out there. It's kind of funny. I'll sit back and be like, I haven't had anybody ask to work with me. They must not like my work anymore or something. But then I realized that, it's a two-way street. I probably should be out there asking other people to work with me, or if I can work with them. I don't know how it works exactly, but I've always had people interested in working with me, which is awesome. And they've always been people that seem to get the way I work and tend to have similar sensibilities to myself. So, because I think working with somebody, you have to really kind of be a little bit simpatico on certain things, and just have a certain, I don't know, you have to work at the same sort of pace and the same sort of anxiety level. So there's some people that, get really worked up and they're hard to deal with. And so that's not fun to do. So you try not to work with people like that. You try to work with people that kind of, run the same way you do, mentally speaking.
And what about when there's kind of like a little bit of a quiet time? Do you find, I guess, compromising a bit and working on a project or with folks that you may normally not work with just because, like you said, they're not running at your speed?
Well, knock on wood, I haven't really had a slow time. I've always kind of had the next thing sort of ready to go. So luckily I haven't had to kind of deal with that yet.
So have you had folks come up to you and do the whole, maybe there's no pay in this, but there's going to be exposure? As you start laughing, I think I know where your answer is going to be.
Yeah, it's a pretty common thing. Luckily, it happened more often maybe 2 years ago, even before that. I've seemed to hit a point where people, I guess, feel that maybe I'm gonna charge them money so they don't ask anymore, and that would be right. The back end and that sort of thing's not really what I want to do anymore. It has to be a paying thing. So
it's kind of weird. The comics industry is really, I don't know what the right word would be, but I would imagine collapsed. I mean, you can go to a convention and, all right, so you saw the last Star Wars movie, you loved it, you thought, hey, J.J. Abrams, the director, was great. You can't really go to a Wizard convention and go to J.J. Abrams in like Director Alley and say, hey, great work on this, let's talk about it. But with comics, you could go to Artist Alley and talk to an artist or a writer on a top publisher book, a Marvel artist or a DC artist, chit chat. And then next thing you know, you're just like, oh, I just talked to the artist of Daredevil, Batman, whatever it is. But I don't know. Sometimes it feels like that small, space between the audience and the people that create it makes some folks feel like there's just kind of like a familiarity where I could go to you and say, hey, I have this great idea. I'll print it and I'll pay for it and it'll give you some exposure. Would you mind drawing it for me?
Yeah, there's definitely that sort of approachability in the comic industry, for better or for worse. I think it's kind of cool that people are interested to that level, that they would be willing to, to kind of put themselves out there and ask about it. It is sort of a strange notion that people are so available in, from the top up, like from the top down, that some of these big writers, they have a table and you walk up and talk to them and take photos and whatever. You're right. It's you don't get that in the film industry.
So many conventions that are out there, and especially on the artist side, I mean, that's where you can at least make some money doing commissions, selling some prints, selling some original artwork. So the audience that you're reaching on a Wednesday can see you that following weekend at a local convention. So you start, maybe thinking, okay, I follow the person on Twitter. And that's a whole different conversation about the collapsed accessibility of social media, where you feel like, oh, I follow this artist or this writer, I know them, we're friends, I can go to them at the show and start chatting with them, and then next thing you know, you're like, I really don't know you, but that's great, thanks.
Yeah, no, I always feel bad because half the time when people come up and they're like, oh, I'm so-and-so on Twitter or whatever, and I feel like I should know who they are because they seem to know me, and I get a little bit, I guess, embarrassed that sometimes I don't really know, because there's so many people and so much information, and I'm really not on social media that much. Definitely less in the last year than I had been before. So at times if it kind of puts me back a little bit, just because I feel like I should know who these people are because they seem to know me, but unfortunately I can't know them all as well as they know me.
So is that part of being a freelance artist, less time on the internet, less time on social media?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, definitely. Well, when I was working at the library and doing art, I was still getting published and stuff when I was doing that, but it was, I had tons of break time at work or even, hopefully nobody at the library is listening, but, even when I was supposed to be working, check the email, check this, check that. Yeah, I don't get a lot of that sort of time now. My day's pretty scheduled, so.
Do you find time to go out, even if it's, just with your wife for dinner or something, for a movie?
Not very often. We attempt to do things mostly on weekends. I've been lucky enough to get pretty much weekends off. I do my work Monday to Friday, and then weekends are for family. So we tend to get things done and do things on the weekends, but every once in a while, maybe once every couple weeks, we'll see a movie or we'll go out for dinner with friends, that sort of thing. It still dominates a lot of my time.
My conversation with Jason will pick up in just a second here. In the meantime, a reminder, if you are listening to the podcast through iTunes, please take some time and rate and or review the podcast. I will greatly appreciate it. Like I mentioned to Jason, I've got quite a few episodes that I recorded before I launched this, just to make sure that I could have consistent episodes coming out on a regular basis. But they've been a lot of fun to record. The guests have had a really good time, so I really hope that comes across when you listen to these episodes. And I've got a lot more on the way. So in the meantime, back to this episode. The Weekends for Families, is that something that you started, or is that something that your wife started?
No. It was an unspoken thing. It sort of started when I went to work at the library. I essentially said to Jackie, that my wife, that I wouldn't take shifts on the weekends. The weekend would always be for us. And that was before Stu. So it was one of those things where it's like, that was a goal of mine, was always to have weekends off, just so that there was always time for us to do stuff. So that just kind of boiled over into comics. I mean, when I was doing it part-time, some weekends would go because I was behind due to work and I had to catch up. But I've been pretty good throughout the last, 6-7 years of making sure that we had time on weekends.
So does Jackie work kind of like a traditional 9 to 5?
Yeah, she has a good job, and she really floats me sometimes, and bless her soul. But her job is definitely a 9 to 5-ish sort of thing. She does bring home a little bit of work, but in general, she's available whenever I'm available.
What's your schedule like, since she's got the 9 to 5, and essentially you can get up and go to bed almost, you basically work from home?
Yeah, I definitely work from home, down in my studio, down in the basement here. My schedule is a little wacky. I get up usually at 10:30, 11 o'clock in the morning, and then work till 6. And then Jackie and Stuart comes home early, but he's pretty. He regulates himself pretty well. So I'm still working when he comes home from school, and then we hang out as a family until Stu goes to bed, and Jackie comes down. We usually watch, an hour of TV or something, and then she goes to bed, and then I work for a couple more hours. So I'm usually shutting down around 2.
Do you ever work after she gets home? You guys are just watching TV and maybe something that you really wanted to finish, but, you guys are already kind of like in, evening mode, but you got to try to at least make some headway or do something. Do you ever do that?
No, not really, because I usually work after she goes to bed. So if that's the case, if I'm kind of behind or whatever, I'll just stay up a little bit later. There is sometimes where something's not working on the page. She'll come home from work and I'll be in a kind of a sour mood because I'm trying to, an arm's not working or her face looks like crap or something. And I've been doing this long enough now. I shouldn't be drawing anything that looks like crap, really, but that's just the way it goes. And so that kind of affects me. And sometimes I kind of say, I'll be up in 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever, as I try to fix whatever the problem is, so that it's not festering when we're sitting having dinner or whatever. Because if something's not working on the table, it really affects me. And so I need to be sort of in a good spot at the art table for myself to be sort of, fully functioning as a nice person to be around.
So when she gets home, I mean, you can ask her how your day was. You guys chat about that. Do you ever show her your artwork, like the progress that you made that day?
No, not really. I think I've kind of stopped doing that. I used to do it a lot more. I'll usually get her to look at stuff that if I can't figure out what's really wrong with it, I'll usually ask her for another set of eyes. She usually doesn't see stuff till it's published.
So she's not even looking at a full story where you're holding off and saying, all right, well, let me at least finish this entire sequence, and then you show it to her. She's not seeing it until it's like basically on the stands.
Yeah. I have.
Is anyone seeing it?
No, just my editors. I don't. I'm kind of bad in terms of socializing with other people these days. I tend to come down to my studio, work in my studio, and then hang out with Jackie and Stuart, and then come back down and then go to bed and then do it all over again. I don't really I don't Skype with people. I don't even really email with a lot of people. I've been getting into a little bit of role-playing games. We play the Edge of the Empire, the Star Wars role-playing game. So I've got a group of friends that I kind of blow off some steam once every couple weeks or whatever. We play for an evening. But generally, I don't show anybody my work, and I just kind of live with it.
So have you ever been a part of any local artist groups or like drinking draws or anything like that?
Yeah, Vancouver actually has quite a big comic book scene. There's a lot of creators here in Vancouver. And when I wasn't doing this full time, I would see them quite a lot. And there is a local drink and draw that I used to go do quite a bit. It's a comic jam. I used to do that quite a bit, but feels like when I had more social time and less art commitment. Now I haven't been to a comic jam in, I don't know, probably like 8 months or something. So
does it get lonely at all?
Lonely in my office?
Well, no, I mean, the whole idea that, it's like, all right, so I've always felt being an artist is like living on an island. So when I go to a convention, it'll give me an opportunity to talk with another artist and see what they're doing, and I always kind of feel like, oh, I wish I could just bring them back to my studio and show them what I've been doing. But, then you kind of feel like a hermit and you're like, yeah, but I really don't want to show what I'm doing to anyone because it's not there yet. But I'm just wondering, you're in your studio in your basement, you have this at least, time set aside for your wife and your son, but you ever feel like, oh, it'd be kind of nice to have another artist just kind of come by the studio, we can shoot the shit, show each other what we're working in, or even when you hear other artists working in a studio setting where they're renting space somewhere, sitting next to other artists, and at least they can throw on headphones and do their work, but they can stop every once in a while, have a cigarette, grab some food, and show the artwork and be like, hey, what do you think? Yeah, it's good. All right, cool. Let me go back to drawing.
Well, there is studio space here in Vancouver that a couple artists have, and I've contemplated every once in a while of when a space comes available in the studio of taking the part of that space and being part of that. And I think that there would be a lot of good things about that, but then there's a lot of drawbacks in terms of the way I work, because I ink traditionally, but a lot of stuff I do on my computer, like all my roughs and my cleanups and stuff like that. So it would be where I would end up doing partial time at the studio space that I rent and a bunch of time here. And I guess I never really felt like I could afford to do that, money wise, to kind of have that luxury of kind of deciding where I wanted to work. So I've kind of just always put it off, where I've always thought, well, it would be good, but yeah, I don't think I can do that. But there's a studio space right now, currently Johnny Christmas and Simon Roy, two artists here that I really like as people, but also I love their work as well. And they have a space together that has, I think, 3 other desks. And a space came up recently, and I just was like, oh, I don't know. And then I said no at the end. But I was seriously thinking about it for a while.
So it doesn't sound like at least that kind of interaction, it's not something that you really need.
I don't think so. I mean, I like to think that I have a handle on it, and I don't, I can just kind of do it. I don't need people to kind of, I don't know. I don't even know. It's not validation, but it's just, I don't know if, I think I can just do it on my own. And and then when I go and I see Johnny and Simon, and I see the work that they're doing, it kind of makes me depressed, like, because they're really talented, and I just look at my pages and I go, oh, why can't I do something like what they're doing? And so it almost kind of works against me when I see other people's work, just because I feel like they're always getting better and I'm not. And it can be kind of self-destructive sometimes for myself like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know, man. I like to see people do well, but at the same time, when I see how well they're doing on the page, not necessarily career wise, but just when I see people's work and they just seem to be getting better, it it should inspire me, and it does, I guess, to a small degree it does, but it tends to make me a little more depressed than inspired. So I don't really seek that because I think I think I'm borderline depressive already. I don't need more help.
I was going to say, I'm like, but you've seen like an evolution in your style, right? Like you feel you're getting better as an artist?
Well, that's the thing. Everything I do, I always think is kind of crappy. And I always look back at my stuff that I did before, and I think, oh, like look what I did there. That's awesome. And then I look at what I'm doing now, like, oh, that's crappy. But in 3 months, I'll be looking back at the thing that I was just crapping all over and be like, oh, that's pretty good, but look where I am now. So I don't know how to answer that. I think that I'm better, but sometimes I think that I'm horrible. So I don't know. I don't know if I'm getting better or not.
But at least you have some perspective where you can look at, like you said, past work and see some improvement, even though in the next sentence you may shit all over the thing you're working on now. But at least you can say, you know what? Yeah, that turned out better. Let me try something else.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I always sound like such a downer. Yeah, I don't know. I think that sometimes I think that I'm doing great work, and then I can come back in an hour and think that it's the worst work I've ever done. So I'm kind of a basket case when it comes to analyzing my own work. And
I don't know that's uncommon. I mean, I guess let me ask this. Is a lot of the artwork that you do precious to you? Do you feel that sense of returning to it, trying to finesse it, trying to change things? Or after you're done with a page, a panel, or a figure, you can at least take a step back, look at it and say, yeah, it's not perfect. I've got to move on.
No, I can never say that it's perfect. Or it's when I think, oh, well, I got where I got, I'll just move on. I need to fix it or try to make it better. There'll be days where I'm just ready to send stuff to editors, and then I'll look at it again and go, no, I got to change that. I got to change that. I got to change that. And it's something that a page that I've been living with for, a couple days or even a week or whatever. And I'll think everything's fine. And then just something in my brain will just say, no, I got to fix that. And, yeah, I don't know. I think it would be great to not ever not be able to go back and look at stuff. Like once you kind of say, I'm done, and it goes in a folder or whatever and gets whisked off to whoever, and you never see it again. Sometimes I think that would be awesome, because then I wouldn't, things wouldn't eat at me as much as they sometimes do.
Do you think the mindset has changed at all now that you're doing art full time? I mean, if you look at a page and you know what, I've got to turn this in strictly because I want to get paid. So you pull back a little bit, but you know that you're not happy with it. But financially, you've got to be happy with it.
To a certain extent, maybe. But I think that I've always, when I turn something in, it's never, I can't think of an instance where I've turned something in where I thought, oh, this is not as good as I could do, but I'm going to just turn it in because, I need to get paid or whatever. I tend to get it to a point where I think that that it's successful before I sign off on it. Whether that will be the case, 2 hours after I send it in. There's tons of stuff where I'm very happy with it, and then I send it in. And then within, even like 4 hours of sending it in, I'm like, oh, I should have fixed that, or oh, I should have. But at the time I sent it in, I was totally happy with it. But there's just some thing where I look at it again, and and it's weird. I like I'm saying, I send it in to them. That should be it. I shouldn't look at it again. But for some reason, I'll send it in, and then I'll look at it again, and then start going, oh, I could have fixed that, or I could I'm my own worst enemy. I should just not look at it again, but I tend to not listen to myself.
Like you said, put it in an envelope, seal it up, hide it, move on.
Exactly. I should never look back, and I look back all the time. I actually have a page sitting right here that I did 7 days ago, and I keep looking at it thinking, oh, what could I have fixed? What could I have made better? And it's just a thing. It's a disease, I think.
No, I think it's just part and parcel with being an artist.
Yeah, maybe. I think there's some guys who can turn it off. Like, I send it in, I got paid, whatever. I'm always kind of doing the what if. Well, what happens if I fix this? Or what happens if I made that bigger or whatever?
Yeah, I remember reading a biography on Jack Kirby, and I guess one of his editors at one point said, hey, this guy only has 4 fingers. And Jack Kirby responded something along the lines of, that's all right, I'll get it right the next time. And I always thought that's pretty, coming from Jack Kirby, who's pretty much a Spartan, on a drawing board, just going through multiple pages a day, that you think, all right, well, he's just saying, you know what, I got to move on, and that's fine. I'll get it right the next page, which will probably be in an hour or 2. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Well, he, as I know, he grew up at a different time when he had a sort of a work ethic that I don't think a whole lot of people nowadays have. He was fairly focused on getting the job done, pretty fast. I don't think that he even used erasers sometimes. You watch videos of his work sometimes, and it's just like, there's certain things that aren't necessarily correct, but he had such a use of shape and stuff that he made things that shouldn't have worked. He made them work. And if it had only had 4 fingers, I'm sure it still worked. Like it probably looked great.
All right, that's the end of part 1 of my conversation with Jason. Part 2 of the interview will be up ever so shortly, and we'll get into everything from comic conventions, balancing conventions as an artist and as a family. And we also talk about digital comics and the evolution of the digital comic books as a medium, and Jason's work that's coming up here with a publisher. It's a good listen, so please tune into that episode. Remember, you can listen to the Fan2Fan podcast on iTunes. Just search Fan2Fan. Please rate and review. You can find us on a number of podcatcher apps, including Overcast, TuneIn, and Stitcher. And always check out the website, fanpodcast.com, for new and old episodes. Till next time.
Steady. You're among friends. I've dehypnotized you. Good work. What next?